Right, I'm doing this video in reply to, I think it was, Motorstep in the new BG features thread in the Game Engine Support Forum. Now, Motorstep, this isn't definitely not an aggressive response, so please don't in any way consider me to be attacking you at all or your views at all. But I am sort of willing to set the record straight, perhaps, because as an open source piece of software, Blender can't really defend itself. Poor little guy. So what we're really talking about, because to be honest, the BGE feature thread is nothing to do with discussing the future of the Blender game engine or why people should be using it. For starters, I wouldn't bother trying to convince anyone here on the Blender Artists Forum to be using other software because they come here to use their own software. It'd be like going into a temple or into a church and telling people how great your religion is if it's not Christianity or any other religion that has a place of worship, for example. You can't go to their home and start preaching how bad it is, or rather how much better yours is, because that's sort of very impolite. But yeah, no, I take your viewpoint on. Let's talk about the Blender game engine as a whole. ID Tech 4 is, as you put it, a proven engine in the recognizable brand and has been used for console ports and many other types of games. Right. First issue is you're addressing the BG as having no games. Now, that is true. I've commented on this before, that we don't really have that many completed games. Now, why is that? Well, to be honest, the reason is that most people here are indie, or well, they're not even indie, they're hobbyists. I'm a hobbyist. I don't create games to make money as an indie developer with no sort of company behind me. I make games because I enjoy it, and I don't even necessarily expect to sell my game at the end result. Now, the trick is, okay, with me, I do want to sell my game, which means I've got motivation. But if you're not making a game for an end product to make a living or for any other reason, then although you may finish it, it's less likely because you're not being forced into it by a breadline, for example. Now, the second reason that people don't make games in the Blender game engine that are successful and well finished is because it's partially because of the user base. If you look at the user base as an age pyramid, we have quite a wide base. A lot of the people using the Blender game engine are quite young, and those who aren't quite young are sort of far and few between. The reason for this is that firstly, Blender is an open source piece of software, which means that it's not talked about that much. I only found Blender Game Engine, well, I did find it quite quickly, but I hated Blender 2.49. I really did. And I've had to use it the other day, and I didn't find it so bad. But the workflow was disgusting. And the reason that is 2.49 really scared people off. If you weren't used to game design, it was quite scary, and if you were, you probably thought it was a bit odd, and it was quite rough around the corners. I think Blender 2.5 is a lot cleaner, and 2.6 as well. It's such a nicer engine to use. The effect that this has upon people is that you end up left with a user base who have nothing better to use. A lot of the people here won't have been able to afford other types of software, me included, and they might not have the motivation to. In my case, why would I use any other software that wasn't Blender 2.6? Because I don't want to make money out of it. It's purely for a hobbyist, and the community is what's important. The Blender Game Engine community are very, very helpful. I mean, the amount of times I've asked questions a few years ago, and even recently, has been life-saving. I mean, just about 10 minutes ago, I finished a demo for someone who was asking how to achieve some sort of distance calculation. Very easy if you're a programmer, but if you're not, it's difficult. So, as a little recap, we have a great user base. We're free, and the user base who do use the engine are quite young. So then you might ask, where are all the older users? Well, the older users, a lot of them, if you look back in the forum's history, were quite old, as in they were above 25s, 30s. The engine is now 10 years old, 12 years old, so a lot of those will have got jobs, got married, and had a life to do outside of Blender. Okay, lots of things you can still fit it around your time, but it means you have a lot less dedicated time during holidays, for example, for Blender use. So that's where the old users went. So we're still quite a young user base. Now, if you look at all the features that have come in from Harmony and Candy, you'll see actually there's so much good stuff coming in. A company that I was talking to the other day, I was mentioning how actually it's great the amount of stuff that we've got coming in. It's a shame it's a bit late for what I want to be doing with them, but it is all coming in, like there's the lights and stuff. I mean, it's great. And the thing is, if you think about these commercial engines, they'll be paying you to create, like, for example, Unity and Unigen, I think is paid for, I can't remember. UDK, CryEngine, they're all software you have to pay for in some form or another, which means that they get licenses. They sell licenses, and so they can pay their developers. The developers have a money incentive, which means they're going to work and do good work. In the game engine, the Blender game engine, no one is paid, really. Okay, the foundation has donation support, but really no one gets paid. It's all for the fact that you like to improve things, and the amount of work that we've had done, considering, is remarkable, to be honest. It really does surprise me when I look at it. So the next little issue we're talking about is I'm going to talk about can you make a good game, and you're talking about Doom 3. Firstly, Blender is a perfectly capable game engine of making good games. All the finished ones and some of the ones in progress look brilliant. The ones that are good and haven't been finished because people have walked off. I'm one person on my own making a game. I've got a team back together again. It's a lot of work. Um, so that's why a lot of the good games haven't been finished, and that's why there aren't that many good games, because there aren't that many finished games. There aren't that many bad finished games because there aren't that many finished games in total, and that's, as I've said, the problem of having a hobbyist venture. Now, the other thing you mentioned is Doom 3 and how it's great because you can modify it. Well, one could say the same for Yo Frankie. The problem, I really dislike people copying games and editing them because I don't think you learn anything. You learn how to do something thinking in the same perspective and thought processes as the person who made the game. If you if you modified Yo Frankie, for example, you'd learn how to make things in the style of the Yo Frankie coders and the style of the Yo Frankie modelers and developers. I have never copied a demo. I looked at the first-person shooter template by Social maybe like 4 years ago, and then I realised I just needed to make my own because it was too complex for me. And then I've learned so much more by doing so. I've learned a lot more. Um, I don't feel like there's anything I can't do now. Just give me the time and the creativity. So I think it's a very flawed argument you've used there. Actually, I wouldn't use it again if I could help it. And what else have you said? Not to bash you at all. Yeah. Oh, the other thing I thought was I was looking at Unity the other day, and yes, Unity is a fun engine to use, and it has created some very good games, but they're all exactly the same. Every single game by Unity I've seen, every first-person shooter is exactly the same. People take the default template and modify it, and it's really not that innovative or fun. I've There's someone I was talking to on Skype. They've created a grappling hook mechanic for their game, and it's very basic, but it was such a good idea. And it's the kind of thing I struggle with is creativity. But by creating your own game with your own creativity, you have such a better workflow than anyone else can argue. Because even if it looks terrible, you've got a better way of playing than anyone else has. Which is why things like Portal and other types of sort of sandbox games are really coming into their own at the moment, because they're new and innovative. And that's why people like Call of Duty or companies behind Call of Duty are quite worried, because they're realizing that the genres become very similar. And they have to add in crazy storylines in order to account for it. That's what I'm going to say for now. To be honest, I think we should just probably let this die on this thread. If you want to open another argument thread in the support forum, we'll do that. I'll be there, because I think it is something that is fine to be discussed. I enjoy discussing it. I'm sure everyone else does too. Just be aware that you're talking about something on a forum where people are going to be using the software for their own ventures, and they're not going to be considering using it if they're a member of the forum. So I wouldn't try and sort of persuade anyone to leave, unless you've got good reason to. Thank you very much for listening anyway, everyone, and I'll try not to do another rant for a while.